In this video, we're going to briefly talk about JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. It is a lightweight data interchange format. Here is an example of JSON object. In this object, there are three key value pairs. Let's take a look at a concrete example. Here, we're using this JSON string to represent a user or a student. And this user or student has four properties: ID, name, age, and is active. Please note, you have to use quotes to quote those keys or names. And you don't have to use quote to quote integers or Boolean, but you do have to use quotes for strings. How do we use JSON to represent an array? Now here is an array of three strings, and here is an array of three objects. The array starts with a bracket and ends with another bracket here. Next, I want to show you how to convert JSON to and from Java object. You probably already know that we can use something called JSON. That's right. Take a look at jsontest.java. Under IntelliJ, under src, under edu.tcu.cs, there is a JSON package, and here I include a JSON test. I'm not going to go into details about this. Please take a look at those code. But the one thing I want to emphasize is we have to understand what's going on here. Now this is our front end, and the front end is sending some JSON string to the backend. For example, we're trying to save a new user whose name is equal to Harry Potter, age is 35, and is active is true. So this is JSON string. When Java receives this JSON string, Java cannot do anything about it because this is string. What Java likes is Java object. For example, user equals new user, user set name, user set age, user set active. There is a need to convert the incoming JSON string to Java object. And then we have JSON. In this section, I want to show you how to convert JSON to and from JS object. I really want people to understand the difference between JSON string and a JavaScript object. So here is the example. So here's a front end and a back end. When backend prepares the data in Java object, and then we serialize them into JSON string, and we use internet to transmit this JSON string to the front end. The programming language on the front end is JavaScript. JavaScript cannot do anything about JSON string. JavaScript likes JS object. So for example, here is a definition of JS object. I know JS object looks exactly the same as JSON string. That's why a lot of students feel confused. So we do have to convert JSON string to JS object. And there is a method called json.parse. When JavaScript receives data from web server in the format of JSON string, we need to use json.parse to convert this string to JS object. Here is an example. This is user as JSON. Here is a single quote, because in JS, you can use single quotes or double quotes to represent a string. So this is really a string, not a JS object. Then if we pass this to json.parse, the return value is a JS object. Same thing. If we're trying to send something, let's for example, we cannot directly send a JS object to the backend server. Before we send, we have to convert or serialize your JS object into JSON string. And how to do it? We can use 6.1 json.stringify. You have already seen this in our previous examples. So here's a very simple example. This is a JS object. Now this is not JSON. This is JS object. How do I know? Because there are no quotes outside the curly braces. So this is a JS object. Before we send it using Axios, before we send it using fetch or XHR, we have to explicitly convert it or serialize it to JSON string using json.stringify. And then it becomes a JSON string. And we can use fetch to send it out. That's why we really like Axios, because Axios will do it for us. You simply just pass the JS object to Axios and don't worry about the conversion. But again, I always recommend using Axios. In the end, I want to show you a very interesting website called JSON Placeholder. This is an online free API that you can use whenever you need some fake JSON data. You will ask, why we need some fake JSON data? So let me show you the reason. Do you still remember this picture? Once front-end engineers and back-end engineers, they agree with the API document and they can work in parallel. If you are working on the front end, and once you finish your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you want to test, but the backend is not ready yet. So you cannot really talk to the backend, but you still want to test your axios to make sure that you are getting the data, and you can populate your HTML using some fake data. That's when we need some fake JSON data. This website here provides several interesting resources. For example, you can access all the posts. If you click here, so this URL will return all the posts in a JSON array. So this is the first post, second post, they're all in an array. Or here are the users. We can use JSON placeholder to generate some fake data to help us debug or test the front end without the backend needs to be ready.